Hey folks, welcome to Shout Out from the Pit, where we bring raw and uncensored stories and topics designed to bring you hope and add to your recovery toolbox. I'm Bob the Old Rucker, and joining us today is Brett, a tribe brother returning to do yet another show with us, and our featured guest, Mark Cameron. We generally don't break our anonymity, but this isn't Mark's debut. As a motivational speaker, he shared his story. He has shared and does share his story with dozens of audiences, and his outreach information is posted in the show notes. During our previous show, Brett mentioned Mark is a dear friend of his over the years, and a particular challenge Mark's not only overcome, but become a champion to many folks with physical disabilities. During the pre-show chat, I got to know Mark a little better, and like Brett had mentioned to me, this is one of those guys you just take an immediate liking to. So, Brett, give us a shout out and introduce our guest.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Brett, and yeah, I'll introduce Mark. Mark's the younger brother of one of my best friends from high school, and obviously, we go back well into the early 80s. He's a little bit younger than I am, so obviously when I first met Mark, he was kind of just a little punk kid, and most of the time, you know, his older brother Mike and I would be out doing our thing, and Mark would be doing his thing just because of the age difference. But obviously, as we continued to get older and everything, you know, we started bringing Mark along with us on some of our activities and doing different things together, and then it got to the point where, you know, and Mark will talk about it, he had his accident, and quite frankly, you know, from that point forward, especially once I got sober and had the ability and the time to be able to do it, I started spending a lot more time with Mark. He had been an inspiration for me up until that point just because of what he had gone through, but he and I spent just many, many hours hanging out at night, talking about different things. And, you know, I brought him up in the past because of, you know, anytime I get to feeling like, you know, the world's out to get me and Brett's having a pity party and it's starting to turn into a raver, all I got to do is think of Mark and trials and tribulations as he's had to go through since his accident. And that immediately puts everything in my head back in perspective and realizing that I got nothing to complain about. In fact, I need to be extremely grateful for what I have for today. So with that, I will we'll get into probably more details, I'm sure, on our growing up together and before and after the accident. But for now, I introduce you to Mark.
Hey, thanks, guys. I was talking to my brother a couple weekends ago, and I was reliving some of the stories of how I met Brett and a couple of the other guys that my brother ran around with. And I always have one vivid memory. I was 4 years younger than them, so when they were in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, I was do the math. That my brother and I shared a bedroom, and one of the things I remember, and my brother doesn't, was that there were a couple of nights that they would come home from running around, and that they would put my brother would have me sign a piece of paper and wake me up out of my deep sleep, and I'd sign a piece of paper, and then I would, the next morning, he'd hand me that piece of paper, and it said, I, Mark Cameron, owe my brother $5. And he would sign his name at the bottom of it. He'd wake me up, so you owe me $5. I go, what are you talking about? And I'm sleeping on the floor because they kicked me out of a bed, and that I'd be like arguing with my brother. I don't remember that. Mike's buddies would sit back and just laugh and tee. I never paid him, but he had the paper. But it was fun to watch them. They had a great relationship, and those guys were all really close, and I did benefit from that. Even in the early years when one of Mike's friends would bring over, he worked at a pizza place, and he'd bring over a couple of pizzas after they shut down the pizza place, and they'd show up, and I'd get a slice of the pizza at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And but as we got older, Brett's right. I did start to run around with my brother and saw Brett and got closer with him, and especially after my accident, it was when Brett would come over and hang out with me for an evening, and that we got to sit and talk and share stories, and we definitely grew a stronger bond.
So how long have you guys known each other?
Oh,
Brett,
yeah, it
83.
82 or 83.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We got some decades there. Okay.
I think I think I just turned 14 when I met your brother, when he started there in ninth grade.
Right around 40 years or so.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing then, Mark, you and your brother are close then and now, yeah?
We are.
Okay.
We are. I, after college, he invited me. He was living in Colorado, and he invited me to move out to Colorado. I had no aspirations to actually look for a job, and I stayed an extra semester in college, attending bar and just running around and having a good time.
Oh, my kind of guy.
Mike sat me down and said, "You got to do something. At least move out here with me." And so I moved out and lived with my brother for a couple of years out in Colorado, and we did the ski town thing and bartended it and worked during the summer and had a great time.
Okay. All right. So you're living the dream, man.
I was, yeah.
Okay. And is there anything specific that stuck out about your growing up, your youth, things that you like to do? What kind of activities were you into?
We grew up out in the country. We were 6 or 7 miles outside of a town of about 100,000, let's call it, I think, somewhere in that area. And there weren't any houses around us. And so we kind of had to fend for ourselves. I'm one of 7 kids, and 4 girls, 2 boys, and a girl. And so Mike and I grew up sharing a bedroom and 2 pair of girls. The 2 oldest shared a bedroom, and the 2 middle sisters shared a bedroom, and then the youngest, she had her own room downstairs, but she insisted she wanted to move upstairs with all of us. And the only space they had available was a crawl space attic, and she was 8 and 10 years old, so that was her bedroom for a number of years. It was in a crawl space, but we found that we had a few neighbors that lived within a mile of us that we would play with, and so just making stick forts and playing in the woods, finding our own toys. That we got pretty creative in some of the stuff we did, and it was just running around playing in the woods.
That's nice.
How I grew up. Yeah.
No, that's good. I myself and a lot of folks that have been on the show, we're kind of like, well, in some cases, we're only children, or we have, brothers and sisters that, parents unfortunately were dysfunctional, broke up, and then the kids weren't raised together. But to hear that, we got an intact family, that's a little house on the prairie stuff. That's pretty cool.
It was. I know the city kids used to come home when the street lights came on, and my dad had one of those big Navy bells, a really heavy duty bell, and that you could hear it from 3/4 of a mile away, and that we could hear it from around the corner and down the hill. That my mom would ring that, and that told us we had a half an hour to get home. And then we'd wrap up our game at our neighbor's house, start walking home.
Wow,
so that was our note to come home, was when you heard the bell ring.
I got a visual, man. That is very cool. Yeah. So Brett, I'm gonna obviously then you guys known each other. Excuse me. You guys known each other for your growing up. Then you hung out with his brother.
Correct. Yeah, and so some of those things like obviously when his brother and I were together, our primary goal was to go out and drink beer and try to meet girls.
Yeah.
So we weren't necessarily around that much, with the exception. One of the nice things about Mike and Mark's parents were they'd take off and do these trips every once in a while. So we'd have that big old farmhouse out there kind of like by ourselves because he had older sisters. And of course they were partying every bit as much as we were. And, we had a lot of really, really great fun parties out there at the Cameron household, this big old farmhouse out, and it was sitting on, I don't know, what was it, Mark? 3/4 of an acre, acre and a half?
Oh, 2 acres.
2. Okay.
Yeah. But we had a grade school across the street for overflow parking as well.
There you go.
Oh,
we used to go across the street to, that little grade school, because they obviously had this big open field and everything, and we'd have bottle rocket fights over the July 4th weekend, and ours are always the kind where, of course, we're about 3 sheets to the wind while we're over there. We're actually giving other, the people that are shooting at us coordinates on how to, you need to go to the left, you missed me to the right, all that kind of stuff. It was just, it was never, ever a bad time out of the Cameron household. And you know, Mark talks about the relationship he has with Mike, but all of the siblings are very, very close and get along very. You know, and this will come out later on too. It's, you know, nobody would wish, you know, what happened to Mark on their worst enemy, but from a support standpoint, you couldn't ask for a better family support group than what Mark's got, and that's pretty cool. I mean, it's just very, very cool to see how they rally around and help Mark out.
It was amazing when I had my accident to see my parents were in their high 60s. Dad was just pushing 70, and that how my sisters and my brother, they all stepped up to help out. And one of them handled my finances, one handled the insurance, one handled the the thank you notes and the website, the blog site, and the fourth one was traveling back and forth. Well, they all traveled back and forth to Colorado to visit me while I was in the rehab, but that they each picked up a function.
Well, let's start.
And I look at other families that I've met that it's a kid that was 24 and his parents were in their late 50s, and that I have no idea how their parents even wrap their head around getting stuff like that done. It's overwhelming, the amount of paperwork, insurance information that comes in. You've got to keep track of.
Let's back up to go forward a little bit. You know, of course, the audience is wondering what are we talking about here. Let's talk about the actual accident. You were in Colorado. Were you living with your brother at the time?
No, I'd moved back from Colorado when I was about 27.
Okay.
And I had the accident when I was 34. I was living in Olathe, and we had a buddy of mine had a lake house, and that every not too far, an hour and a half from here, real close to Emporia. And every year we would get together and have a guys' weekend, and that we'd eat big steaks and smoke cigars and tell lies and laugh and drink and have a nice time. The weekend of my accident, I was just recovering from an inner ear infection, and I told myself I wasn't going to drink, get in the water, or get on the boat because I had the vertigo. But when I woke up, I knew I'd taken my 14th day of medication that morning, and me not knowing much about medications and stuff like this, I took a long nap, and I could hear the guys coming in. They'd been out on the boat drinking beer, and you could hear them on the lake having a good time. And when they came in to reload the cooler, I said, "Hey guys, let me go with you." And they'd already pulled the boat away from the dock. I said, "Don't worry about it. I'll just swim out to you." And I ran off the end of the dock in an area I'd swam before, and just wasn't paying close enough attention. There was a cooler at what I thought was the end of the dock, but because of my vertigo, the cooler was 6 or 8 feet from the end of the dock, and my plan was just to dive in the water and do a flat dive and swim out to them. When I jumped over that cooler, I pushed up higher, clear that 6 or 8 feet, and then dove in and dove too deep and broke my neck. And so that's where the whole thing got started. I could hear it underwater, kind of like if you're tapping your ring on your watch and you hear that pinging noise. I could hear the noise of my vertebrae, one bouncing over the other, breaking, and then everything went black. I tell my audiences that it's like standing in a dark room, standing in a lit room, and turning off the switch as fast as that room goes black was as fast as I went numb from my neck down. My whole body just went numb. And so I started floating up, and I just celebrated my 20-year anniversary, and one of my sisters sent me a note and said, thank God you can float. And, I floated up and laid there face down underwater, trying to hold my breath, hoping that one of the guys on the dock or in the boat would jump in and turn me over. And they got to me just in time and inhaled just a little bit of water. And that caused some later lung infections from the lake water getting in my lungs. But it was just a small amount. So I was real lucky. That's where things got started. I don't know how much farther you want me to go with the story.
Cut in for a sec. Brett, where were you? What was going on in your life when you found out about this?
So that was, you've heard my story. It was pre getting sober, but it was also pre, I hadn't gotten near to the point of no return yet. Was still drinking quite a bit, but not to where that was. Long story short, is I get a phone call from one of the other buddies that we all used to run around with, told me what happened to Mark, and let me know that Mike was either en route or would be heading up to the hospital for the incident. So I kind of basically cleared out. Yeah. Mike's the older brother of Mark. So I kind of, and I don't remember, Mark, what day was
he
it?
was in Durango.
I know he was in Durango, but
Saturday, September 11th.
Okay, there you go.
And he was in Durango and had a 14-hour drive. That I think this was an early cell phone. This is 2004, so the iPhone I don't think was out yet, but he was getting updates by cell phone.
Gotcha.
And making the drive up there.
So I'm a little fuzzy on my details, but I know that I hightailed it up to Kansas City, to the hospital, and went into the hospital. Mark's parents were there, his sisters were there. Everybody was there in the waiting room except for Mike. And so I asked where Mike was at, and he had basically fixed up the back of his truck that had a little camper on it to where he could just sleep in there. So like, well, he did that long drive, so he's out sleeping in his truck. So I went out, found the truck, woke him up, and I don't know, it was 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and I got him up. He went through what he knew at the time, because I hadn't really gotten any more details other than what I'd gotten on that phone call. And so he kind of got me up to speed. It was kind of an emotional deal, obviously, for him, as well as for me. We drank a little whiskey, and then we went back into the hospital and hung out there for the rest of the day. And we had, pretty much all of our group, as well as even a couple extended folks, were coming up. Mike didn't come into town all that much. So between wanting to show support, be able to see Mike and all that kind of stuff, we'd hang out at the hospital for a while. And I never did see Mark in the hospital. I didn't have any business going in there. His family was, being very, very protective of, kind of everything that was going on up there. And I certainly respected that. It's going to sound like I'm patting myself on the back, to a little degree it was, but it just dawned on me. I was sitting there one afternoon, and one of Mark's sisters was there with her. I think he was 12 years old at the time, so Mark's nephew. And he'd been stuck in the hospital for God knows how long, with nothing to do. He's 12 years old, this, that, and the other. And everybody's, nerves and mindset and just state of mind is all fried. And I see him go up and ask something to his mom, Mark's sister, and she kind of snapped at him. Not, just typical, she's trying to find the patients and all that kind of stuff. And so it just hit me. So I went up, grabbed, and his name's Mark as well. So I grabbed little Mark and looked at his mom, and I said, we're going to go run around, and we'll be back in a couple hours. And you could actually just see like a load of weight come off her shoulders for a little bit. So that was really probably my only contribution the whole time I was up there, other than just being there for Mark and, the others that showed up to see him and show support.
I think that's pretty key, though, when we have a situation like what you went through there. You got your immediate family that's trying to figure out what's going on now, what's the next step. And of course, children are innocent, and not just children, but there's other people that, love you and want to get information. I mean, people care. And so as a support element, and Brett, that's kind of what you felt there, give these guys the latitude to figure out what they need to do. I absolutely cool. I think that's a good message to those of us that have not been through that. Something like that happens. How can we help and not be in the way?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Mark, what?
It's a tough line, because you want to be there to show support, but reaching out just to say, hey, let me go feed your dogs. Let me go get this done for you.
Yeah.
But tell me, you've been here for 4 days. Has anybody mowed your lawn? I mean, that's, in a situation like that, I don't know. I wasn't in the waiting room, but I'm sure that my sister and brother-in-law, somebody walked up and said, I'll take your kid to softball practice, or let me help out.
Yeah.
That's such a huge relief that you just one thing off your plate when you got so much on. So yeah, that would be anybody out there when you're here. I went to the hospital for a friend with a friend, and they brought me up, and it was an emergency situation. And just before we left, the person went through their house and grabbed a dozen cans of soda and boxes of crackers and cheese and sausages and just a couple bags of chips, showed up to the waiting room and said, you guys, I know you haven't eaten. I know that instead of going down to the Coke machine and taking time away from this waiting room, I brought you guys sodas and food. I thought, what an amazing idea to show up with something like that for the family and everybody in the waiting room.
Yeah.
So that's
good stuff.
That's a huge growth business.
Yeah, so having a support element is really key. God help those that don't have them. Oh, that's got to be rough. Hey, so Marks, what? Let's coming back to you now. I don't know, so I'm asking on a timeline. I guess we could look at this next segment of the show as like a timeline. How was it in the beginning? You're obviously in a hospital, so what was going through your mind, immediately?
When I turned over in the water, I've always met life with a sense of humor. I am a professional at saying inappropriate things at inappropriate times. And I stole that line from a movie, but it was like, I heard it. I'm like, oh my God, that's me. And so when the guys rolled me over in the water, the first thing I said was, I broke my neck. And they were, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. And at this time, there's 13 of us there, I think, and I've got 7 or 8 guys all standing around me in waist deep water holding me up. And I said, I just ruined the weekend. And they were like, what? I said, I was looking forward to those big steaks over there on the grill. I said, this is going to change the whole weekend. And these guys were like, Mark, you have to be serious. I am serious. I said, we need to get me out of the water. And I'm also kind of very much a take charge guy. They wanted to cradle me and carry me out. I said, no, we need something solid, find me a backboard or something, board to put me on. And they said, well, we can carry you like this. No, I tried a lawn chair, and I was very take charge. And somebody brought a door from a closet, and they floated it down under me and set me on and then they got me by ambulance to the hospital, and that was a very small town hospital. And they needed to life flight me to KU Med, a larger hospital in Kansas City. And so they told me, you definitely broke your neck at C4-5, and we're going to have to life flight you to a larger hospital. And I said, okay. I said, bring in, and I mentioned a good buddy of mine. I said, bring in Breck. I need to talk to him. And he came in, and I said, Breck, get a pen and paper. And he reaches one of the nurses' hand of a pen and paper. I said, get Stephanie's phone number and Sarah's phone number. And Breck looks at me like, what? And both nurses are looking at me. I said, I haven't partied much in this town, but you have got the most beautiful women I've ever seen. We're coming back here to party. Breck, I said, get their numbers. And Breck's like shaking his head, looking at me going, you've got to get your head in this, Mark. And I'm like, this is how it's going to be. What do you want me to do? Start crying? I can't. This is where I'm going to be. But it was tough. The toughest part was once they were getting me loaded in the ambulance, a good friend of mine was at the head of we loaded me on the board. We didn't use the stretcher, and we put the door in the ambulance. And he got trapped in the ambulance. And now I'm alone in the ambulance. I've got two EMTs at my feet, and I've got the other guy, a buddy of mine, is at the head of the board. And this came back to me a number of years later. I'd forgotten about this memory. But my buddy said, okay, how do I get out of here? What do you guys want me to do? He's talking to the EMTs. And I looked at him, and I started tearing up. That was when I could be away from the crowd and be by myself. I got teary, and I said, please don't leave me. And he stopped and looked at me, and he started tearing up. And he grabbed me by and put his hand on my ears or something on the side of my head and said, I'm right here. I won't leave you. And he rode with me for about 20 minutes to the hospital. But that was one of the first and only time I really, for the most part, showed fear for the next 3 weeks. Wow. When I was in the hospital, I was intubated. tube in my throat and that I couldn't close my mouth. And that I didn't understand that. And so I couldn't make any noise. And I'm looking out the glass window of the ICU room, and I could see my family out there. And I thought I was a vegetable. I thought I was in a coma or something. And that I looked at my dad, and with this tube in my mouth, he can't hear me or read my lips. And I don't even know if my lips are moving or if I'm trapped in this state. And I thought, Dad, we talked about this a few months ago when Maria Shrivo, the deal in Florida, when the parents were trying to unplug their daughter.
Oh, I remember that story.
My dad and I talked about it just a few months earlier.
Oh my!
I said, if I'm ever in that state, don't you hesitate. You just walk right. Don't ask for permission. You just walk in and pull the plug. And
Wow.
Dad was like, well, I'll do it for you if you do it for me. And as I laid there thinking I'm in a coma, and thinking I'm trapped, that my mind is completely conscious, but I have no movement and nothing. They won't ever understand me. But Dad, we had this conversation. You better unplug me. Unplug me. You better do it.
Wow.
And that's where I was for a few hours. That I was like that until somebody could come in and react to some of my eye blinking and stuff.
Wow. Hey, so before we get into that, Mark, we need to take a quick break and just hang on for a second. We'll come back to the show. All right. Welcome back to the show. Mark, I hearing this, I'm making assumptions because that's what people without physical disabilities do. We make assumptions, right? We see somebody that's disabled, and right away, we think, oh my God, they must be losing their mind. They must be freaking out, and some other things, the feel sorry syndromes and that kind of stuff. But right from the get-go, you seem to have a pretty cool and collected head through this, yeah?
It was funny. They life-flighted me from the hospital. It was a 45-minute trip from the first hospital to the second one. And I ran a company before my accident. I started a company 5 years before my accident, and I had a number of orders that were on my desk and was shipping out truckloads of steel and processed steel. And there were a number of orders on my desk that jobs that had to go out. When I got off of the helicopter, my sister was there, and I said, and she should have had a steno pad, because I gave her like a dozen things that needed to be done, and 9 of them I had to do with. The first one was, call my boss. He knows our insurance agent, and he'll get this stuff started. And after that, it was, and when you're on the phone with them, tell them job such and such needs to be packed. The bolts are on the shelf, and the hardware is here. Job such and such. I've already called 3 trucking companies. It's so and so trucking, and I'm giving her notes like that. And she's looking at me going, "This is not stuff I'm going to remember. I'll tell your boss you're going to be out of the office for a while." And
well, really, I mean, when you think about it, the last thing, I again, not having experienced what you experienced, the last thing to go through my mind, I think, would be, responsibilities. I'd be more like, oh my God, what's going on? And that kind of thing. But you're on top of the game. What was it like going through when you started the realization? I mean, tell me the transition, I guess.
I went back and forth. I kind of waffled back and forth in the hospital. Like, I knew I broke my neck. I wasn't sure that it was final. That was in the water, in the ambulance. I knew I was going to have it was going to hurt. I mean, things were going to be different. When I got to the hospital, I maintained that joking attitude. And then I got to the next hospital. But then at times I'd get confused. In the 11 days I was at in ICU, there were times that I'd say stuff that made it that I didn't realize. We needed to pack clothes to go with me out to Colorado. I showed up in a pair of no shoes. I was in a pair of swimsuit, and I had a shirt on. They cut the shirt off, so I had no belongings. But I needed to pack a bag to go with me for recovery. And my buddy came. They called in Breck, and he came in and said, "What do you want me to pick up?" He knew my house. He knew what I liked to wear, and I said, "I need that pair of brown shorts. I need this one. I need these 3 T-shirts. I want my work shirt because I have a customer in Denver, and I'm sure she'll come by and bring my work boots, and I need my workout tennis shoes, thinking I'm going to recovery. I'm going to rehab. I'm going to be pumping iron.
Right.
Well, if I'm going to be pumping iron, I'm going to be in the gym, getting my body healthy again. But this is 2 days before I was saying I'm paralyzed completely from the neck down. I may never walk again. But when they said, "Oh yeah, you're going to rehab," and they do amazing things, I was under the understanding I'm going to take an air ambulance to Colorado, but I may be driving my truck home after seeing a client.
Wow.
And,
So, I mean, like we watch in the movies, we regret to inform you, Mr. Cameron, you are now a, quadriplegic. I mean, did that conversation come? What it looked like?
It did. Yes. We had percentages of when I would walk. There was a time, I guess, at the hospital that I may die.
Oh.
The lung infection was so bad that they couldn't get it all cleaned out. And I think there were some touch and go times on day 4 or 5. I think they were pretty serious. I didn't know that. I never came out and asked through my recovery until about month 4, am I going to get this back? I never asked my doctors. We'd be in meetings, and they never offered. They didn't want to. I'm sure that they run into this with everybody. They don't want to say, "Mark, you've got a 10% chance," or "You've got this." And so it's like the Jim Carrey line from Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance, and that I never came right out and asked them what's going on, but I myself would get mixed messages. My siblings would say, "You're going to get through this. You're going to be strong. You're going to get stronger." And I don't want to say they were living in denial, but they knew I had a chance. Yeah, they were being optimistic.
Sure.
There was a slight chance.
Yeah. Who wants to look at a brother, a sibling, and go, "Oh man, this isn't going to work out."
Yeah,
I mean,
you're screwed.
Yeah. Who wants to do? Gosh. All right. So let's again, Brett shared some stories with me. You shared some anecdotal stories. I had to actually cut you off because, hey, listening audience, Mark is not a feel sorry guy. Doesn't do the feel sorry syndrome. So, I as the host wasn't sure, how this was going to go, especially when we originally chatted in the pre-show last week. I wasn't sure, what direction do we go? Because I know the message I want to put out, but I didn't know the kind of person you were. And then actually, there was a couple of times I had to stop you because I almost felt guilty for laughing, but you don't. That doesn't tell me. I tell the audience, what goes through your mind when you see somebody that's, got the feel sorry syndrome for, I'm making that up, guys. I don't know if that's real or not, but when they obviously try to, I don't know, patronize you, is that a right word?
Oh, it is. I get that a lot. And that people that pity me. And, it's stuff like at a restaurant, having the waitress walk up and look at the table and start taking orders and then look at the person next to me and say, "What's he having?" And then I'm sitting there looking at him like, "Did you just say that?" Hey, they turn and look at me and I'm having a burger. I want no fry. I want this and I want this, this, and this. So they're looking at me going, "Okay." Yeah, it does happen that people will patronize me in that way. They'll underestimate me. I rolled into a store just before Christmas with my sister, a clothing store with Kohl's. And as we rolled through the front door, she was 5-10 steps ahead of me. And there's a long line of people, maybe a dozen people, in one line right next to the door waiting to be checked out. And I'm rolling by them, and all of them watched me like crows on a line. And all 12 of them were just watching me roll past and watched me for a good 50 feet. Until they got out of my eyesight and I couldn't see them. We pulled down the aisle just a little bit, and Maureen turned and looked at me, and her mouth was open. I said, "Do I have a booger? What are they looking at?" And she's like, "I've never seen anybody. I've seen people do it, Mark, but never that many people all standing in one spot." And I'm like, "Yeah, that was really weird." And yeah,
Gosh. Mark, I could see
know
you
what
at
it's
that
like to
point,
be.
just the kind of guy I've gotten to know you to be. I could just see you saying something like, now that I've got your attention, I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse.
That's right. Nice
So,
self-citing.
so how do you, well, like in the lady in the restaurant, you kind of made it clear, I'm sitting right here, hello.
Yeah.
And so I mean, tactfully, how do you deal with situations like that? Yeah.
Tactfully, even if you're looking at somebody at the table, if you're a waitress, or if you are in public and you need to get something from the group, even if the child has Down syndrome, you can say, and what are you having? Now, if they can't enunciate, they're going to start to say something, and their parent or the person they're with is going to say, he'll take some chicken fingers or whatever.
Oh, that's fair.
That you give everybody at the table a chance.
Yeah, don't assume that somebody can't speak up for themselves.
Right.
Okay.
You've got to know. Yeah, that would be I won't say humane, whatever that word is, a proper way or polite way to handle.
Right.
It always shocks me when.
Yeah, so I shared with you, and I'd like to go there now. Okay, so I'm a physically abled individual. I haven't dealt with one-on-ones with folks in my life, and then we're going back 1,000 years. When I was in the Army, I had the opportunity to visit wounded warriors, and I got schooled by that fella, and I do want to share that because it woke me up. I was trying to pander to him. This individual had lost his legs in combat. And so, I'm like, do I feel sorry for the guy? What, because I really didn't know what to do. And this guy wasn't having it, but he never directly schooled me. He did it indirectly. We ended up on a double date, he and his wife, me and my wife, we ended up at a mall, and I'm pushing his wheelchair around, and he says, take me in that shoe store. I have no idea where this is going. I'm like, okay, I'll take you in the shoe store. So I roll him into the shoe store, and he takes control of his wheelchair, and he bumps into a lady that's stocking shelves, and she turns and sees him in a wheelchair, and he has no legs, and she looks at me and says, can I help you? And I said, actually, because I don't know where this is going. I don't even know what's going on. What do I say? So I said, well, I'm with him. And she's kind of shocked. I'm shocked. And she looks at him and says, what can I do for you? And this guy at that moment changed my life. He looked at her and said, I want a shoe. I just want one shoe. I want a shoe, and I want to put it over the fireplace. And I just want to imagine. And her face dropped. I'm still like a little bit in shock myself, and I'm thinking we need to get out of here. So I push his chair out. We're back in the mall, and I'm feeling really weird about this whole thing. And I was like, dude, we can't leave her, hanging like that. He's like, yeah, whatever. So we go back in the store. She sees us coming this time, and so she asked him, can I help you? And he goes, nope, I'm with him. Now he points at me. And I'm like, oh, brother. And I don't know what to say. So I just looked at her and I said, he wants a sock to go with that shoe. And at that moment, we got a good chuckle out of it. I'm sorry for the lady. She didn't feel the same we did, but we left that place laughing. And it occurred to me, this is a normal human being that's lost his legs. He's still got it going on. And over the years, I taught public school for a couple of years. I had inclusion is what they call it when they bring students with disabilities in. And I'd already been schooled, so I had a great idea how to deal with my students. And then I got involved with the Wounded Warrior program. I went on the Baton Death March in White Sands with gents that had prosthetic limbs. And I'd already learned you treat these guys like you would treat anybody without any disabilities. And if they feel otherwise, they're going to tell you. And so put the ball in their court.
Yeah. I had told you guys, I met this with a lot of humor. After my brother had been in town at the first hospital for 7 days, he needed to get back to work. And we already knew that I was going to be flying out to Denver, and Mike lives in Southwest Colorado. So he knew he was going to come up and see me that first weekend. And the Mike and my parents and my sisters were all in my room on the morning that Mike had to leave. And obviously he's feeling real bad leaving his little brother in this situation. And I went from being intubated to being trached. And that's where they cut a hole in your neck and they put a tube. But because they're breathing for me, I can't speak. I don't have any air moving past my windpipe. And the Mike was saying goodbye to me.
Sorry, I just remembered this story, so I'm chuckling ahead of you. Sorry.
Mike is trying to say goodbye to me. Mark, be strong. We're going to get through this. You're going to come out of it better, and I'll be there with you in Denver, and I'll be there. We're going to fight this, and just keep your faith up. And I moved my lips. That's the only way people could communicate, was to read my lips. And I moved my lips in such a way that you couldn't understand me. And he's looking really close at me, and I mimicked come closer. So he came closer to me, and I said it again, and I did marble mouth. Oh, please got you open up that like that. And he's not going to understand what I said. And I said, come closer. So he got closer, and I said, your ear. He gets his ear right to my mouth, and I licked him from the bottom of the ear to the top of the ear.
Okay.
He jumps back. He calls me an asshole and jumps back. And my mom slaps him on the arm and calls him by all three. And first, middle, and last. Michael got mad. And he puts his hand up to his ear. And he goes, Mom, he licked my ear. And I'm crying. I'm laughing so hard because it was the first chance I had to share with my family that it was still me. I'm still that inappropriate guy.
Love it.
And he's wiping out his ear. The whole room breaks out in laughter, and I'm tearing up because I'm laughing so hard. I'm now looking at them saying, wipe my eyes, and they're wiping they're laughing and wiping my eyes. And it was my first chance to share with them that it was me. And and ever since that day, it's my goal to make people laugh.
That's awesome. That's
not always at my misery, but at my sense of humor.
So, Mark, where did the term quad squad originate?
When I came back from the hospital, I was determined to live alone. And a group of people had revamped. I had a 1,200 square foot home, 2 bedrooms. It was a 1950s home. I couldn't get my chair down the hallway into the bedrooms. There was no access for me in the bathroom. So a group of people got together starting mid-December in Kansas City. And it was less than 30 degrees out, whatever. And they dug out a pit and started building an 800 square foot addition on the back of my house. And so I was determined to live in that, and I was going to live alone. I was going to figure out how life was going to go. Obviously, I can't live alone. I need to have caregivers in the morning, get me dressed, get me in my chair, brush my teeth, feed me. But in the evening, we reached out to friends from high school and college. And because I've got 6 other siblings, we know people like Brett and his group of friends that my brother grew up with. And that we coined the term the Quad Squad as those 30 or 40 people that would come over and stay the night with me each night. We'd go out for dinner, we'd go to a baseball game, we'd sit home and cook something or order a pizza and watch TV. But
wow.
And then at the end of the night, they'd get me out of my chair, put me into bed, change out my leg bag. We'd teach them all how to do this stuff. And that they were the Quad Squad.
That's
and initially,
cool.
my dad wasn't really keen on the idea, on the name. Can't you call it a different name? I said, Dad, it's perfect. What do you call it? And he's like, well, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm just thinking because, I had a stigma growing up. I have 2 different color eyes. And, I try to hide it, like, I know this sounds ridiculous, but I would wear a patch, I'd do all these crazy things as a kid because, children can be cruel, let's just call it, because they don't mean to be cruel, but it's like, what's wrong with you? How come you had different, are you a freak? And so I would do these bizarre things to try to fit in. And I thought, well, I'd rather have a patch and somebody, feel sorry for me than see that I have 2 different color eyes and call me out. As I got older, I don't know where I learned it. Honest to goodness, I have no idea. But somebody once said, you just need to own it. It is what it is, deal with it. Right. So on that line of thinking, what are your thoughts about your own, your own situation?
I think I mentioned this to you the other day, but when I am in a new audience, and it's inevitable when you walk up to a person you first meet, you reach out and you shake their hand. These people know I'm a quadriplegic. They've heard my story, and that they walk up and they reach out to shake my hand. Now, I know they're going to be embarrassed, and I want to break that for them. And I looked at and they're like, I don't know. And I look at them, I said, oh, you can pat me on top of the hand, or you can pull my finger, whatever you want. And they laugh, they get my sense of humor immediately, and they're like, okay, all right, let's see how this is going. But I've heard of a friend of mine that the daughter, her boyfriend introduced himself, went to shake my hand, and immediately she chastised, oh, you shouldn't do that. And I told you he was a quad. I looked at the guy, and I'm like, hey, just pull my finger. We'll break the ice here. And that made everybody laugh, and it broke the ice, obviously.
Oh, I think that's awesome. And I can see people trying to be protective. I mean, that's, for some of us, that's a natural thing. We want to protect, but sometimes we can do it, and it's really at somebody's demise. Like, hey, stop it. I'm a normal human being here. It might be a little bit different physically, but I can handle this. It's good. So that's a message to people.
Yeah, I was going to the grocery store, going shopping with a sister, and we were in like a Marshall's or something. And they would walk ahead of me, and there's stuff in the aisle. A box of this needs to be restocked. And if they kept pushing stuff out of the way, hey, would you knock it off? Like, what? And I'm like, they're slowing down the progress getting down the aisle. I said, I'm not that big. I can get through that gap. I said, unless I tell you to, don't do it. And one of my sisters, she's walking down the aisle. There's a long couch. And she doesn't see at the other end of the couch is a floor lamp. And she goes to bump the couch with her thigh, bump it out of the way. And I said, no, it's fine. She gives it another bump, and it knocks the floor lamp over. And it's glass, and it shatters on the tile floor. And I'm watching pieces of glass slide 50 yards across the floor. And she immediately turns and looks at me and says, Mark, be careful. I am absolutely drop-jawed. I didn't. Immediately, the woman comes out with a broom and says, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. And I go, it wasn't me. And she goes, yeah, right, like I'm going to knock over a lamp. So, hold on, this isn't right. And it was very funny how she recovered from it and made me look foolish. She caught me way off guard. It was fun.
Mark, you shared some stories about your experiences in rehab. One in particular still sticks in my head about a young lady who was also in rehab. Her circumstances were a little bit different than yours. Can you share that?
It's amazing. What a concept to put all of us with the Craig Hospital in Denver. I'll give them a little shout out. They are amazing. They do both spinal cord and traumatic brain injury in the same hospital. One side of the hospital is TBI and the other is SCI. And so you're in there in the workout room. You're in the cafeteria with people, and that you get to see some of society's toughest cases. And I met this with a lot of humor, but I still had some work to go on my recovery. And as I'm in the workout room, and they're holding my arms up, and they're trying to instigate muscles to fire, and I'm watching this probably 15, 16-year-old girl sitting on one of the workout benches, and her parents are kneeling down next to her, talking to her, and her therapists are there, and they roll in this hot pink wheelchair. Obviously, the wheelchair is just going to leave the hospital in. It's the one she picked color. And she wouldn't smile or recognize the people around her. I know these therapists have got to take this stuff home emotionally. And the physical and occupational therapists. And I did everything I could to make them laugh and have a good time with their day. And this girl was just being a jerk. She wouldn't smile. She wouldn't respond back as they showed her how to pop off the wheels and hold the chair up, transfer it into the car, and things like that. And I wanted so bad to yell out to her and say, "Hey, you little bitch, look what you're doing. You're being a jerk to these people that are trying to help you in front of people like me that I'll never move my arms again. You're paralyzed from the belly button down. You've got a lot of life left in you." And I was so mad, so upset. They got my arms back in place. At the time, I just graduated from the tent, meaning I could roll around the floor by myself. And so I was instructed to go back to my room and wait for the next therapist. I start out of the room and down the hall, and I wanted so bad to turn around and tell her off and just go back in there and really let her have it. And I turned toward my room, and I passed the door that was 2 doors away from mine, and I knew I'd heard the story. This 70-some-year-old guy had a higher injury than mine, and they were gowning in those yellow gowns like you saw around COVID, the personal protection stuff.
Oh, yeah.
The nurses were having to gown up in that. So they're coming, and he may have had, this is early MRSA, so he may have gotten MRSA or something like that. And so they're gowned up, they're taking off their gown as they come out and put it in the disposal barrel. And I see inside his room, and I realize at that moment that if this guy leaves the hospital alive, he'll never be more than an extension cord away from the wall. And that I rolled into my room, and the nurse said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Just close the door and come back and get me." And I knew I had some time by myself, and I broke down and I cried. And I cried really hard because I wasn't mad at that girl. I was jealous of her. And it was a huge breakthrough moment for me that, oh shit, even now, it almost gets me a little verklempt. It took me a little, but from that point on, I changed my attitude. I didn't have to look far rolling out of my room to find somebody that had it a lot tougher than I did. But I could be sitting at lunch with a guy across from me that had a traumatic brain injury, and he's speaking like he's got a dozen marbles in his mouth. You can't understand a word he says. He can't feed himself. He's got full mobility, but he can't feed himself. Would I want that? I don't think I would. I don't know. I've never been in that situation. But as much as I hate being a quadriplegic, it doesn't take long to find somebody that's got a sorrier story than you. And I tell that, I do the motivational speaking. And I told this a few times to the 8th graders that I used to speak to. I said, you think you've got it tough. You can't get the new pair of shoes. Your parents won't buy them for you. You can't get, you've got 2 tests tomorrow. Maybe your parents are divorced. Maybe you lost a parent. I said, if I'm looking around this room with 300 kids, and I can tell you right now that if I interviewed each one of you, there would be a story in this room that I wouldn't trade places with, that I wouldn't want their barrel of monkeys. I said, there's somebody in this room that has lost a parent that's sleeping on a couch, that maybe your hopes of growing up with the childhood that I had, and up till the age of 34, as much fun as I had with life, I wouldn't want to trade with you. And I said, don't ever think you're the sorriest case in the room. You'll always find somebody that you wouldn't trade fences or trade places with. And that was a huge breakthrough moment for me. It really changed my outlook in recovery. And I got much more involved, and I got much more outgoing and accepting of my condition and position.
Well, that's actually like a really good segue of a lot of the things that that I've talked about in the groups that I've been into with my recovery regarding Mark and I's relationship. Because as, a temporary member of the quad squad when I'm in town and go over and there were some times when I had quite a bit of time to be able to do that and cherish those evenings immensely. But that was my point. What I'd talked to Bob about, and Mark, you and I have talked about it before, but we had a lot of late night conversations talking about, not the differences between what you have with your accident and what I have with my addiction, but from a recovery standpoint, how many similarities there were. And certainly one of them is that, we've talked about it and joked about it before. We're never the top of the pyramid. Every time, I think that I've got something really, really bad going on in my recovery and it's not going the way I think it should be, or this, that, and the other, invariably I run across somebody that's got a heck of a lot worse than I do, and I need to check myself before I wreck myself. Said that the other day, and Bob thought that was pretty funny. But
yeah, I captured that quote. I'm sorry you just mentioned it because I was going to steal it and use it for my own. But okay, now the secret's out.
There it is. But that was one of the things, that was just one of a number of them. Kind of one of the other things that I've thought about, if we talk about the similarities in our recoveries is, the story that you told about when you were out there at Craig and basically getting a very straightforward discussion point from, one of those doctors or therapists out there that if you want to survive, it's going to be up to you. And it's, and it kind of goes to on our side of the fence from a recovery standpoint that if I want to maintain my sobriety, it's up to me. I've got to do the work. And I don't want to, steal your thunder or anything, but I do think it's important for people to understand that lecture you got before you left.
Yeah. I had an interaction 5-6 years ago. A friend of mine, another good friend of mine, was going through AA, and he had been, they did the intervention, and then they sent him somewhere in Arizona, New Mexico, I don't remember where it was. They sent him to a facility where he stayed for 90 days, I think, the recovery program. You guys know what that stuff means. I don't exactly. And I sent him a letter. He couldn't take phone calls or make phone calls other than to his wife on occasion. And I sent him a letter, and I said, Teddy Roosevelt, Man in the Arena.
Oh, yeah.
One of my absolute favorite spots. And if you haven't heard of it, anybody out there listening needs to look it up. I included in the letter, I started out, hey, you've got a battle. And I sat here and thought about how our battles correlate. We're both in a position that we didn't want to be in, but we're going to fight it the rest of our lives. And we're going to fight it for our family, for our loved ones, and for ourselves. And it was, I wish I had the letter open right now. It was much better put together than what I just did. But it was in that gist of we're both doing it. We're both fighting the battle. But it's up to you and me to fight our own battles and do what we have to do. And then I shared with him that quote from Teddy Roosevelt that it really made a difference. I got that quote when I was in rehab, in my rehab being the hospital. And that I got that quote from a guy that I really didn't know. He was a distant relative. And he sent it to me and said, this has always meant a lot to me. And I read through it, and I read through it 3 or 4 times. And every time I read through it, I find something new about it, about the man marred with dust and mud. And it's amazing.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I'll put that in the show notes for the listening audience, the Teddy Roosevelt, Man in the Arena. That is really profound. Yeah, I'll include that for sure.
Yeah.
And again, we've kind of already talked about it, but and you mentioned it or made kind of mention of it, Mark, but the whole acceptance thing that both you as well as those of us that are in recovery have to go through. It's one of those things where our mindset has to get to the point where we realize that we just can't do the things that we used to be able to do. And doesn't necessarily mean that we got to like it, but we got to accept it. And so, again, I go back to a number of those late night discussions that we had, and it always amazed me. And it's why I bring you up quite often when I'm around in a group and doing meetings, is because there's an awful lot of inspiration and the similarities, even though, and we talked about this too, obviously I'm never going to know what it's like to be a quadriplegic. You're never going to know what it's like to be an alcoholic. But aside from that difference, so many of the similarities of the things that we've had to deal with in order to, not just survive, but actually live and have fun and be able to have a meaningful life.
Yeah. I mean, you nailed it there. It is acceptance. It's me admitting that I'm a quadriplegic, and I didn't have to admit it like you. I guess I did. I had to admit it like you. When I first got to Craig Hospital, they said the tennis shoes I brought were sized to fit me, or my running shoes, and the nurse immediately said, you have to have an oversized shoe So it's easier for your caregivers to get them on. Your toes don't get bunched up. And my buddy that was there, and my girlfriend at the time, went out shopping to go get me shoes. They said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want a pair of red Chuck Taylors." And I looked at Donnie looked at me and said, "Well, you've never seen me wear Chuck Taylors." I said, "No, but when I roll into the room, I want that to be the first thing people see."
Wow.
And that was my method. I wasn't denying the fact that I'm in a 400-pound wheelchair. I was admitting the fact that I'm in a 400-pound wheelchair. But if the conversation is going to be broached with a complete stranger, I wanted those shoes to be something that they could break the conversation with. And 100 times in 20 years, I wear two pair. I wear a red pair and a black pair, and that's all I ever wear. And hundreds of times I've rolled into a string of a Walmart, a restaurant, that people will come up to me out of the blue and say, "Love the Chuck." And I'm like, "Yeah, thanks."
That's
and then
awesome.
They're able to say, and then they're able to say, what happened to you? But they wouldn't normally walk up to me without starting the conversation. They wouldn't normally just walk up out of the blue and say, "What happened to you?"
Right.
People, they start the conversation with, they need an opener. And they always refer to my Chuck Taylors.
That's awesome.
I see people as I'm rolling in the room. If they look down and that they smile, or that I've had little kids that have come up. "I've got a pair just like that." "Do you really?" And it's just great for an opening line. And that's me learning to accept and inviting people into my story.
That's great. You know what?
What's going on?
You make me think of something else that we talked about in the pre-show, and I want to kind of go there now. You know, in my mind's eye, you know, now that I'm, you know, in my own recovery journey, you know, there was a time when I started this thing, I had the poor me's, you know, and it just I really sucked at life because I wanted to be normal. You know, and of course, I don't have a physical disability like Brett shared. I have a mental disability. I have an addiction. And so I didn't want to have that addiction, and I hated it. And I hated the fact that I couldn't go out and just have a simple beer with people because, you know, one's not enough. And then I learned in my recovery journey, and I'm going somewhere with this, that, you know, God never wastes a hurt. And in this journey that you're on, you had shared your attitude now compared to where it was then. Yeah, you were outgoing, you had hobbies, you had activities, you had all kinds of things you were involved in, but you had shared that you were missing something that you gained in this recovery journey. Can you go there?
In my motivational speaking, I talked to the audience about making good friends, the importance of making good friends, and that you need to surround yourself with good people that in an event, they'll help you out, whether it's moving a couch or giving you a ride to the airport. And then second, you need to be a good person. You need to reach out and offer to help your friends, whether it's carrying their books at school or moving a couch. And but the point that I also make is the value and the importance of volunteering time. I looked back at my circle of friends was immense, hundreds and hundreds of people that reached out with well wishes and things like that, and dozens and dozens or hundreds of people that helped build this house that would come over and stay the night with me. All of these people volunteered for me, and I looked back at my life pre-accident. And yes, I was there to help buddies build a fence in their backyard or to move a couch up down a tree limb with a chainsaw. But I didn't make an effort to walk on a Saturday afternoon when I laid on the couch and read a book. I could have walked out the door, and within 6 houses of me, going up and down the street, I could find at least 4 people in their 70s that would have loved to have somebody clean out their gutters or mow their lawn when they're going away for 4 days. And I didn't do that. I didn't reach out. And that's just in my neighborhood. And then I really opened myself up and thought, you had the tools, you had the knowledge, at least enough knowledge to run. I could have been in a Habitat for Humanity. I could have gone down to a soup kitchen. So So I would invite the listener that, and I've told this to Brett, and I've told this to other people, that in that time that you guys could have been sitting on the couch drinking beer, and that now you're giving yourself the woe is me. I'd like to go out for a beer. Find another release, and if you are looking, get into volunteering, get into a Big Brother, get into a soup kitchen. You're going to help people out that have got it worse than you. A lot of guys go in those soup kitchens that are alcoholics and homeless, and that you can walking down your street, you can find somebody that needs their garage cleaned out. Some 70-year-old that's tripping over stuff in his garage, and you can help them sort the trash from the treasure and put it all back on the shelf out of the way so he doesn't break a hip. But yeah, get out and volunteer. I believe that's the point you were the
yeah.
thing that I told you, Ruck.
Yeah, definitely. You were specific when you said, well, I'm just going to quote you. Shit attitude doesn't help.
Oh, yeah. And, and I don't want to bring down the conversation, but me being the guy that says inappropriate things, when you said you just want to go out and have a beer, I almost spoke up and said, yeah, how about if you want to go out and just stand in the grass? And when you say you've got the toughest story or how tough life is, imagine me. Sure, I can have a beer, but somebody's got to open it for me and they got to put a straw in it. They got to prop it on a table in a spot that I can drink it. But when you are feeling sorry for yourself, when I say you're not the sorriest case in the room, what I wouldn't give to pull the weeds in my yard. Oh, it drives me crazy to see weeds in the landscaping. I've got to call somebody to do it for me. But yeah, I'd love to be out there doing that kind of stuff.
That's an excellent point. And the word that Brett used earlier was like correlation in our recoveries. We both have things that we have to accept, and then there's things we can do about it. So I'm thinking of I actually stole it from somebody, but the 3 Ps. We have to have our individual programs, just our self-care, and then we need to have the next P is a purpose, and then we need to have a passion or at least an attitude. You've touched on those 3 things. I really didn't ask you too much about your self-care program. What does that look like, a self-care, before I actually go on to the other 2 that you expressed?
When I was in the hospital, a guy that was a recovered quadriplegic, he's a great story. He met my sister in St. Louis, and he had told my sister, make sure he rides an electric bike that he gets on. And what they do is they put electrodes on the front of my legs, the back of my legs, and a pair on each glute. And I get in front of the bike, and the electricity starts the bike up. And then as the bike gets going 30 RPMs, the electricity starts to shock the front of one leg, the back of the other, and causes each muscle to fire. And I bought that bike. I was bike number 3, because they just developed it. And I bought that bike almost 19 years ago, and I've put about 15,000 miles on that bike.
Wow.
And the benefits are astronomical. The benefits, it toughens up, it obviously builds up the muscles in your legs. Your leg muscles work as a second heart. If you haven't ever heard that theory or that.
No, I haven't. Go there.
Point. Your leg muscles, the power, the draw that your leg muscles require, healthy leg muscles, it works as a second heart to help pump blood. And so those guys that had amputations, their heart is working by itself. It doesn't have the help. Now, they don't have to pump it as far, and it doesn't require that it pumps around the legs. But with the leg muscle, and so not only does it help my heart, it draws on oxygen, so it made my lungs much healthier. It doubled my lung capacity. When I left the hospital, I could breathe about 1,000 cc's. When I went back a year later for a reevaluation, I was breathing 2,000 cc's, and shocking the PTs and the OTs because I recovered that much.
That's
it
awesome.
Up the skin. It builds muscle around my butt bones. Less susceptible.
So you tell them you have tight buttocks?
I do. I actually had a caregiver one time say, you've got the nicest ass I've ever seen on the block. And what that does, Bob, is that the people in wheelchairs are really susceptible to pressure sores from sitting in the same place so long. And so the skin gets pushed on for an extended period of time. It breaks down that skin. It opens up for infection. It's got wounds that you've got to potentially stay in bed for months at a time or have surgery. Because I strengthened up those muscles around those two bones, it protects me from that. It helps my digestive tract. There's a lot of self care, just pushing myself to make sure I ride the bike and make sure my caregivers can get on there.
That's fantastic. When we talk about having a self-care program, the tribe, you've heard that term. It's like you guys having a quad squad. We have a tribe, a bunch of guys that encourage each other. We learn from each other in our individual programs. We talk about reading, exercise, meditation, doing service work, as you mentioned, and prayer. When you've got the exercise, man, I think you exercise more than a lot of people I know. So tell me about say again?
Oh, I was going to say 2 or 3 times a week for a couple of hours.
Oh, that's perfect. And we know the benefits of exercise. In fact, I think a group of us did a show on that some time ago. But going to the reading, I know you use the aid of technologies to read. So when I'm going to talk about technologies here as we come closer to the resource part of the show, tell me about what kind of stuff do you read for your edification, stuff that helps to build your mental acuity, maybe.
Before my accident, I didn't read much in high school or college. Once I got out to Colorado, I got introduced to the joy of reading, and my brother had a huge collection of books that I would read. Then when I moved home, I started going to garage sales and just picking up anything. A lot of spy novel kind of stuff and a lot of whodunits, but also some biographies and things of that nature. I was all over the board. And I'd had, at the time of my accident, I think I had 3 books at the time going on my bedside table. But I'd set one down and pick up another one, start reading it, and go back to the first one. After my accident, I realized when I tried to read, I could do it. There was a prop, kind of an easel that had this stick that you'd bite down on, and you'd turn the pages with it. It was so rudimentary. They didn't have books online you could get back then in 2005. It was so rudimentary. I lost the will to read because it wasn't the same as curling up on the couch under a blanket, opening up and thumbing through a book. So I didn't. So instead, I think I'm a little ADHD. I think I have been my entire life.
Oh yeah, me too.
But I get on the internet. I'll open up 5 stories at the same time, and then I'm just plugging through news stories. I'm a lot more active in the news now than I was before my accident. I stay abreast of what's going on and who's doing what. So that's my reading.
I see. Well, do you
mentally? And
you can take. I think you just mentioned you take advantage of the audio books, right? That kind of stuff.
I don't. Not much. No. I do. Lately, I've done a little more on podcasts. Kind of a tight ass. I don't spend money. I bought an Amazon Prime, and I never investigated what it comes with. I don't know how many audiobooks they have on there. But every time I think about a book or I hear about one, then I call Alexa. I call her Alice. She's in the room. I call Alice to open that book, and then we'll play we'll play you the first 10 pages, and for $12.99 a month, you get 2 free books. I don't need to hear it that bad. So no, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and with the podcast, I like to listen to adventure stories, with survival stories, meaning like wilderness survival.
Okay.
And there's a couple others that I listen to that are interesting just to hear the guests have on.
Okay.
And I play through those. So I don't do the books on tape or the audio books.
No, but I think you might be not thinking of everything though. I mean, I know you do an awful lot, or at least you did, and I'm assuming that, at least at some level you still do, but you do an awful lot of research in terms of, what kind of
spinal cord. Yes.
what the latest and greatest from a medical standpoint is with your condition, the technology that's available, and
mine
things
and
along
so many
those
others.
lines.
I got signed up for a web edition. They send out, I can't think of the name of it. They send out the latest and greatest, whether it's a new truck that Ford's putting out that's got a bigger engine, or a new camper that has solar panels on the top, or it's a scientific breakthrough on sleep apnea, and all different Crohn's disease breakthroughs. And then I'll read through a lot of these articles, and then I'll copy and paste them and send it out to somebody I know that's looking for a camper, or somebody I know that has Crohn's disease. So I do send out a lot of articles that have to do with industries friends of mine are touching, and myself. I find breakthroughs on, and people will send me a lot of stuff too. If they read an article that talks about spinal cord breakthrough as far as recoveries, and so yes, I do stay abreast to what's going on in technology. I don't, and I've said this for a few years. I don't think when they come up with these breakthroughs that I'll be the guy first in line. I'm 20 years post-injury, and it's weird. It takes me, I tell kids this, when you break an arm in gym class and you're in a cast for 6 weeks, the minute you get that cast off, you can't just immediately tie your shoes because your atrophy, not only in the muscles of your arm, but the atrophy in your brain, that you've got to go to PT, go to physical therapy, to learn how to rework those muscles in your hand. And it takes me time to sit down. If you told me that I needed to make a fist, it would take me a few minutes to remember what it would take, what muscles I had to move in my arm, in my forearm, and in my fingers. And then in my mind, I had to make that fist. And it takes a few minutes for me and then to unmake it and then remake it will take just almost as long. If I sit and concentrate on it for 20 minutes, then I can close my eyes and make a fist nonstop. But it takes a while. And I don't think they'll be coming to me with that breakthrough and saying, we're going to put this in your spine and you're going to be walking in after some therapy. So I've come to grips with that.
Right.
I believe, and I'm not trying to play a downer. I'm not in such a bad spot. They're gonna go after the guy that breaks his back low or still has some movement in his forearms. They're gonna go after that guy before they come to somebody that's a full quadriplegic. And if they go to that, a full quad, they're gonna find one that's 6 weeks post injury. It still has the muscles and still has the memory to start working on it.
Right.
But I love to share them because it's hope for everybody. It'll happen. The technology is going crazy.
Man, I love I love your outlook, Mark. Really.
People working on it. Yeah. So many different people working on it. And it's amazing. I love to research it and to see how things could have been different.
Right. Mark, as we roll into our closing here, there's a couple things I want to ask you straight up. So, folks can reach us on our website, shoutoutfromthepit.com. We have a couple of ways. We have a message board, and then we have, they can email us at team@shoutoutfromthepit.com. If there are folks out there that want to request you maybe doing a motivational speak for their group, organization, or what have you, or they want to, I don't know, just reach out to Mark, is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm wide open for stuff like that. If you know somebody that's in a wheelchair, somebody that is newly injured, that's really a passion of mine, to get on the phone with a family member and walk them through where I was psychologically 4 weeks or 4 months into my recovery. I've done that a number of times. If you are looking for a resource, let's say a good friend of yours' son is injured and you're looking for a resource, I have a website that I put together all of the items that I found are most valuable to me. In some instances, I put down websites and starting costs, things that I've built and designed myself or had people build for me. I've got 30 or 40 items on there, even to the stuff that you keep in the backpack on your wheelchair, zip ties and Allen wrench steps.
Would you
your chair if you're out open?
Would you be okay? if I
Definitely.
put your website, you just have to send it to me, and if you don't mind, and I'll put that in the show notes.
I would prefer you. Yeah, it'd be easier than somebody grabbing a pen and trying to scratch it down now.
Yeah, let's do that. Send that to me, and I'll put it. I'll put it in two places. I'll put it in our show notes, and then Redbeard will. And as you guys know, I'm the mouth of the show. Redbeard is the brains. He's my partner in this endeavor. So he'll figure out where it goes best and make it happen. We'll definitely get it in the show notes. And I appreciate that.
I have two points of contact for two reasons. One, my 501c3, my mission statement, if I memorized it, was to reach out to the newly injured and their families to help them with the transition, and to reach out to audiences, to educate audiences on the able-bodied audiences on the disabled life.
Okay.
And so I do that as well. I just talked to a nursing group. I've talked with a number, obviously the schools, nursing schools, and hospital groups that have called me and done Zoom calls or in-person calls.
I love that. Okay.
Yeah, I love doing it.
Okay. I'm going to.
In fact,
go ahead.
let me tell you this. I was in the emergency room a couple of years ago with a serious lung infection. And the guy, I was fighting. It was not, I was touch and go there for about 18 hours. The nurse came in, the guy came in, my nurse, and he leans over me, and I'm intubated. So he's just talking to me. And he said, I went to the JUCO where you come in and speak. I saw you speak about 3 years ago. And he was reading my lips really. He said, excuse me. He said, you're really strong. He said, I learned a lot from you, and thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us. Sorry, I swallowed something the wrong way. He said, thanks for coming in and taking the time to talk to us. He then went out to the waiting room and told my sisters, your brother's going to do fine. He's a fighter, and I was one of his students. He said, I saw him speak about 4 years ago at the junior college, and that really gave a lot of relief to my sisters to have something. And so it's I love doing this kind of stuff.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, reach out to me and see if you can get that.
Wow, that's awesome. I didn't even know that. Okay, so I'll definitely make sure that's in the notes. So, wow. Hey, Brett, do you have any thoughts you want to share?
Well, I think, for everybody that listened to Mark and him go through his story, there's not much I could add. You can tell just from listening to him that, he's just a phenomenal guy. He was a good guy before his accident. He's a good guy now. I had told people, many, many times that I get into the room with Mark, and for me personally, it's kind of like a recharge. I really do. And I think I've told you that, Mark, but if not, there you go. It literally does. It just, you have a way about you that that's just infectious, and it's a good kind of infection. And anytime I'm around you, I get jazzed up, beefed up again, and it's amazing. Phenomenal story. Absolutely great guy. And again, just for, assuming somewhat that a lot of our listeners are more in line with the addiction type recovery, there's just so much that I've been able to learn and add into my own set of recovery toolboxes that I've gotten from Mark. And, I'd never be able to thank him enough for that, as well as so many other people that have, helped support my program. But, Mark is an integral part of my recovery program. And, I say thank you and I love you, brother.
Amen.
Love you too, Brett.
Mark, do you have any closing thoughts or words of encouragement for folks maybe just starting their recovery journey, or folks that's maybe already or they're on their recovery journey?
I can't think of anything right off the top of my head other than fight the good fight is one that I always enjoy that quote. Keep pushing on. Keep pushing the rock up the hill. Is that an expression you guys use? Every day you just go back and keep doing it until you're stronger. I guess get your strength and set your goals and get your strength and know where it is, what you reach out to for relief when you're down, for the pick-me-ups, like what Brett said. And good luck.
Yeah,
tough
thanks.
fight. I can't imagine what you guys are going through. I'm sure it's a tough fight daily and hourly. And I got a lot of respect for the people that are doing it.
Hey, ditto. I tell you, this is the best I ever lived. I am not ashamed that I am an addict. I'm grateful that I'm an addict because, and you said some of the things right now in this show, I didn't have a heart for people before, while I was in my addiction and before leading up to it. I was just all about me. And this program of recovery has taught me to be a better human being. And I can see where it's done the same for you. And like, again, I refer back to Brett's remark about the correlation of the similarities. Some of the takeaways that I got just from this conversation with you is that I need to be more supportive. And I need to treat people normal, no matter who they are. They're people first, and they'll set me straight otherwise. I need to have thick skin and open mind to that. It's cool. I like some of the same tools that we have. You guys mentioned the quad squad, and of course we have the tribe. Our elements that we hold each other accountable. We grow together. One of the big things I like is the acceptance. Like, own it, who we are. It's okay. God, I'm saying this, but God has us right where we need to be. And finally, when we talk about the 3 Ps, you shared your program, your purpose, and your passion. Service work, volunteer, get out there, and while we're still alive, we can make a difference. And Mark, you're an inspiration, man. You are making that difference.
When you talk about God has a plan, I lost a good friend to an airplane accident, flying a private plane. He went to actually passed away, and I had a really tough time in those first few hours of accepting it and understanding why. And my sister called me up, and I said, I don't want to talk. I just wanted to get out and go run a 5-mile loop. And I got to go. Mark, I want to tell you something. God has a plan. He's all-knowing, and he did this for a reason.
Yeah.
It's going to make a change in your life. It's going to make a change in somebody's life. It's going to make a change. He's doing it for a reason. He's done this. And then 3 years later, I broke my neck, and I'm in the hospital and getting ready to be transferred to the next hospital. And my sister comes in, and I looked at her, and she said, how are you doing? And I looked right at her and said, God has a plan.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
And she looked at me and teared up, and she said, yes, he does. And I said, I don't know what it is. And 2 years later, I met a young kid with a spinal cord injury similar to mine. And he looked at me and said, Mark, why is this happening? I said, we don't know. I said, you and I are in this position right now because God wants us to be. I said, we're going to make an impact on somebody. I don't know who that is, and I may never know. I said, that impact could have been in the first 10 minutes of my accident. It's going to change that person's life that was there. That impact may happen 10 minutes before I die. But somewhere along the way, God has this plan set that you and I are going to make a difference in somebody's life.
That's right.
That's his plan.
That's right. God never wastes a hurt. He's got a plan for us.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I just got to say in closing, Brett, thank you so much for introducing Mark and I. This has been really good for my journey. So I'm very, very happy. I'll have to buy you a cup of coffee for this,
Absolutely my pleasure. And I knew, but as long as I've known Mark, I knew it was going to be a fantastic show, and I think it is.
Amen. And obviously Brett's part of our tribe, and he's part of your quad squad, so he's been a big influence for all of us involved.
Sure.
And
Sure.
Mark, I'm grateful that you took the time to share your experience, strength, and hope. And I pray our audience, gain some insight from your journey that'll help them with theirs. You're obviously an inspiration, and I just pray that God continues to use you and do great things in your life.
Thank you.
All right.
I hope so.
All right. Well, so that's it, folks. Thanks for listening. And please share our show with folks that could use some encouragement, some extra tools for their recovery journey. And as always, it wouldn't be the old Rucker if I didn't say you're not alone. And if no one's told you that they love you today, we love you. So God bless you and have an outstanding recovery day. Peace out.